The 13th of August, when voters will head to the polls to elect the president, members of the National Assembly, the councillors and council chairpersons. The Electoral Commission of Zambia says that ballot papers have been distributed across the country and verified by various stakeholders. Zambia has also welcomed international delegation and election observer missions, including some from the European Union and COMESA. We saw that statement coming out yesterday from the AU as well. Incumbent President Hakainde Hichilema is seeking a second term in office under the ruling United Party for National Development Alliance. For an update now on this and other developments, we're now joined on the line by our correspondent in Zambia, Arthur Davies Sikopo. Arthur, a very good afternoon to you. I would imagine it is both exciting and also anxious-inducing period for many Zambians today, or this week rather. Just brief us on, firstly, the state of readiness for Zambia to hold these elections on Thursday.
Yes, thank you so much, and great to have me here. Just like you have rightly put it, so we're going to the polls on the 13th. Yeah. That is on Thursday this week. And of course, Zambians are getting ready for this particular election. From all fronts, we could see campaigns going on around the country, and people canvassing for their preferred candidates. We have seen different political parties doing that. So all is set, I think, according to what through the briefing that the Electoral Commission of Zambia has given us. They have distributed ballot papers across the country. And of course, we have seen, even independent monitors, monitoring, the distribution of, these ballot papers across the country. And I think the people are ready to, go and, exercise their right to vote and see who they want to lead Zambia.
I mean, we've been having various conversations throughout this week about what Zambian people actually want on the ground. Just give us a sense then in terms of some of the mixed reactions you are probably also observing on the ground. On the one hand, you've got this narrative from government speaking about, stability and governance. On the other hand, Zambians are really decrying the levels of living and the high cost of living, rather, on the ground. What is it that they want, and the kind of change that they would want to see in these elections? So,
with the coming of the UPND through Hakainde Hichilema in 2021, Hichilema has been promising that he's going to fix a lot of things in the country, and I think we've seen in certain areas where he has, I think, scored. We've seen, some of his campaign, messages, even just during this particular campaign, scoring around, reintroduction of, free education. From earlier on, it was mostly not so pronounced in the other government, but Hichilema came through and pushed it to grade 12. So now we've got learners who are going back to school are free of charge. We've seen a constituency development fund being increased, but of course there are other concerns that he said he's going to fix it, but he hasn't fixed literally everything, because people today are hungry. When you go on the streets, people are complaining, about not having enough liquidity in terms of cash, to go about in their daily lives. So there are all those concerns. So obviously the messages have gone to the people, both from the opposition and of course from the governing party. So it will now be up to Zambians now to see what they want, whether to continue with Hakainde Hichilema, who has fulfilled some of his promises, which others are saying he hasn't fulfilled literally all the promises. But obviously also others are saying that maybe we try somebody else. Maybe somebody else could bring us the change that we need. So yeah, there is that particular mixed reaction, especially in provinces like Lusaka, Copper Belt, and a bit of Central Province, and of course Eastern and Northern provinces somewhere there. So there are all those concerns. around, who they want, to lead them.
Yeah, talking about who they want and possible other contenders, President Hichilema is seeking a second term, as we know. Could the opposition mount then a serious challenge to Hichilema? And where are the key battlegrounds to watch on election day?
Indeed. So earlier on, in fact, I think for the last 2 or 3 years, we've had that talk of, that there's no opposition in Zambia. And that has continued. But I think, interestingly, just a few months before the election, we have seen Brian Mundubile, who was in the Patriotic Front then, and his running mate, Makebi Zulu, coming up. And I think these are the closest contenders, or this team is the closest contender to, Hakainde Hichilema. And I think we've seen Hakainde Hichilema, not having it easy to even get back to his words that, there is no opposition in the country, and, what the UPND would say. So this time around, I think there is Brian Mundubile, who is sort of leading in terms of from the opposition. So this is the one that I think is going to cause a little bit of, or to cause sort of some anxiety in Hichilema. Because I think this time around, Hichilema, I think, can't say that, there is no opposition, because I think he's seen the crowds that, Mundubile has been pulling across the country where he has been going. We, of course, saw a situation where he has been attacked in several of these places where he has been to. The recent one, I think, being in Western Province and Eastern Province. So Mundubile has not gone to Southern Province because he fears that, that being a stronghold for the UPND and the Hichilema, he can't, his security is not, secured. And rising from that, we saw about, I think, 30, according to him, about 30 of his security team being detained and currently not yet being charged for some days now in Western Province, which is also a stronghold for Hichilema, and of course Northwestern. So these 3 provinces are mainly for strongholds for Hichilema, and the battlegrounds, I think, will be mainly be in Lusaka Province, Central, and of course Copperbelt provinces. These, I think, are going to be the battlegrounds. Of course, Eastern Province and Northern and Wapula, somewhere there, Hichilema might try to get some votes, but I think Mundubile might, also be present in that particular, in those particular areas. But I think the 3 battlegrounds here are Lusaka, Central, and of course Copperbelt. This is where I think they'll have to battle it out to see who gets it.
And looking at those battlegrounds, I want to go back to our earlier discussion around just the preparedness, particularly as it concerns, voting and the Electoral Commission's readiness. In terms of preparations, what are we looking at there in terms of political parties and voters themselves? I mean, how confident are they then that the distribution of those ballot papers that you spoke of earlier are transparent, and that all constituencies have received the correct materials?
So there were some concerns. Those, I think, were just mostly online concerns that, there were some, ballot papers that were printed elsewhere, such as neighboring countries. But the Electoral Commission of Zambia came in and, dispelled all those rumors. And I think from the observers that we've had that have been around, we've not noted over any, suspicious comments or comments that are, are driving to a suspicious a sentiment that, maybe the ballot papers that have arrived maybe are not the correct ones, and or maybe there's something fishy around that. We've not gotten such. But of course, we've gotten instances where, in strongholds of mostly the UPND, members of the opposition, like in Livingstone, they were being chased away, and certain independent observers were being chased away by, ruling party cadres that, they wanted to secure, those particular, ballot papers. But I think from some of those isolated incidences, we haven't, gotten any negative, instances coming out from, the preparations. And I think all has been going on well. We've got independent, observers that have, marked, the preparation as going on very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we will be speaking to you very soon again as we mark, of course, to those elections. There are at least less than 48 hours to go. But Arthur, thank you so much for your time and, of course, giving us a perspective in terms of how everything is looking like. That's our correspondent in Zambia, Arthur Sikopo, there for us.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa.